Robbie.
Brian, great to see you. How you been?
Well. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, long time no see.
Everyone, we have a great guest on today. We have my friend Robbie Abbanat from Winchester, Massachusetts. How are you doing, Rob?
Good. How you doing, Brian? Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on.
Of course.
So, Rob is a special guest. Rob's been in the construction space since we graduated college back in 2021. So, Rob's going to talk all about being superintendent. I mean, he'll get more into the construction process working for a GC.
Yep.
So to start off, can you kind of take us back to where you started, how you got into the business?
Yeah, for sure.
Where you're at.
So I started off, it kind of came back trying to pick schools to go to back when we were in high school. I didn't really know what I was going to do, so I kind of just, threw it at the wall trying to find out what school would be best for me. It was kind of between Wentworth, UNH, and a couple other schools like that. UMass Amherst, where you went. But after kind of going through it, I figured Wentworth is best for me. It's a smaller school, which at the time I hated. I was like, I didn't want to go. Yeah.
Why?
I wanted like a big school that I thought would be, a blast to go to. But I was talking with my old man. He was saying, Wentworth is going to be a small school. You can learn a lot, more one-on-one time with teachers and stuff, which for me is just what I need. So I landed on Wentworth, and I was pissed about it for years.
Are you still pissed to this day?
No, thank God. It worked out after all. But for about a year or two, even when I was at the school, I was like, I don't know if this is the best fit for me. So I went to Wentworth and did construction management, which I ended up liking after a couple years. First couple years, like I said, it wasn't really that interesting. But then they do a co-op program at Wentworth.
Okay.
So I got an internship with John Moriarty and Associates, which is a big contractor in Boston. I didn't know anything about the contractor business. I didn't know anything about John Moriarty, but my boss at the time did. So I used to be outside raking leaves at a hardware store in my hometown.
Yeah, Winchester Fells Hardware. This guy you walk in and Abbanat would be there.
I would be there every day. So I was outside raking leaves, and this guy he'd pull up next to me, he'd see me, and I would just talk to him. Just about anything, whatever he was doing, what I was doing. And when it was come time to get an internship, my boss said you should go talk to him. You should try to get an internship with this guy. I didn't know anything about it, but I threw my name in an email list. He ended up calling me back for one of his people there, and I got the job. So
there we go.
Wentworth is a trimester program, so you do an internship while you're at school.
Yep.
So my first day, I was going to show up with a bag of tools. Thank God I didn't, because I walked in and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Turns out I was the GC, so I would be handling the guys in the site. So.
And then to go back, could you explain what kind of job were you applying for, and what is a general contractor? When you say GC, he's referring to a
general contractor. Yeah. So I applied for a job, like Brennan said, general contractor, which you basically oversee the guys on the job site. So when you're building a building, obviously you probably have about 100 to 150 guys when it's really up and running. So my job and the people I was working with was to manage those guys.
Okay.
And make sure those guys are doing what they need to be doing, following the drawing sets that were given from the architect and engineer, and actually executing the work to build the building.
Okay.
So everything from excavation to demo at the beginning all the way to putting the doors and hardware on.
So are you more a generalist when you're the general contractor? Because do you have a specialty? You're not a specialist in being an electrician or a plumber. You kind of know everything.
Yeah, so I'd like to say you kind of dip your toe in everything. You're not really, over time you pick up more experience, but you don't really know that much of everything when you start.
Yeah.
And then as time goes, you kind of get a little bit, like some guys are better at doing steel erection. Some guys are better at putting the facade on the outside. Some are better with landscape. The nice thing with John Moriarty and Associates was they let me do each piece as I was coming up. So when I started, I was just kind of doing little stuff and working with my boss, the head superintendent, kind of helping him out with everything he was doing. And then as you are tested and as they see that you're making progress, they give you your own stuff. So all of a sudden, instead of, here, can you help me talk to these guys and make sure they're doing this, it was, hey, we have this big open space, can you go in and turn it into the finished product?
Oh, really?
So I did a amenity space, which was like kitchen, bathrooms. There was a pool outside with a big patio. So instead of, hey, I just need help with this one little thing, it was, hey, now's your time to see how you do. Here's your open space, blank slate, and have at it.
Wow. And did you have a background in the trades before you went to Wentworth?
No, I not really. Like I said, I worked at this little store downtown, a little hardware store, and I think about as much of a background I had in it was selling nuts and bolts.
Okay.
I think one thing that did help me was kind of knowing the different materials, if that makes sense. Like, you knew, obviously everybody knows what a bag of concrete is, but there's like little stuff like set screws, like small little items that you might not know if you just went into it.
Yeah.
And I found that helped me down the road.
Okay.
Especially with kind of like how to use certain stuff, like chop saws, angles, like different tools and stuff, whatnot. I kind of picked up just being there.
Okay.
That I found did kind of help down the road.
And that Wentworth, so was it classroom work and also out in the field, or how does that program work? Because I know it has a pretty big reputation, and there's a lot of people that are.
Yeah, that's what I liked a lot, which is why it was another good fit for me. Was that it's very hands-on. So we'd go to school and we'd have classes where you sit down, read books, take notes, blah blah blah. But we'd also have classes where you'd go into a room and they'd say, "Here's a stack of bricks. Go build a brick wall." So you actually mix mortar and you have your trowel and you're building a brick wall just so that you can visualize how the guys on site that you'll later go work with do it.
Okay.
We also had a lot of classes with surveying, which you basically set up a tripod. You look through a little scope basically.
Yeah, you see those guys all the time.
And you shoot elevations, yeah. So that's the building blocks for construction, is learning how to do that. It's all elevations and basically GPS mapping out where your building will go.
When you say the building blocks of buildings, what do you mean by that? Are there certain steps like, hey, you got to go surveying first, then you do this?
Yeah, so that's typically the best way to learn is you start at ground zero, which is just taking general surveys. So elevations of the foundation wall you're going to install, elevations of whatever you're going to put in or what's existing. So you know where stuff was, and then you can go back and later compare it to where stuff is now.
Okay. To
see if stuff moved, if it's not supposed to, or maybe it is supposed to.
Wow.
So you go through this whole process of surveying that kind of shows you that and how to map out a job site.
Okay.
So that was a big thing to learn at school, which I forgot all of until I actually started working. Then it kind of came back as you're working again.
I feel like you got to get the reps in, and if you just learn it briefly, then you'll just pick it up quicker when you actually have to.
Exactly, yeah.
So then
you kind of get a feel for it, and then once you go do it, you're like, oh, okay, now it makes sense, yeah.
And so you're doing this classroom work, you get this internship at Moriarty, and what is it, Moriarty & Co.?
Moriarty and Associates,
and Associates.
Yep.
And what grade was that? Was that your junior?
So that was my, junior year. So your junior year fall semester, you go to a co-op program.
Okay.
So you go to school in the spring, go to winter break, and then when you come back your fall semester you come back your spring semester, every day you get up, you go to work. So It was 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. You know, you're getting up, go do work, go to the home, make dinner every single day like you're a working citizen.
Wow. And what are the typical app for a job site? It's what, 5 to 2?
Yeah, job site, some trades get in a little bit earlier, so some trades will be 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. Typically we would be 7 to 3.
Okay.
But you like to get there a little bit early to plan your day out, or just do whatever paperwork you have to do. I always like doing it in the morning, so you kind of get your paperwork and emails out of the way, and then you can spend the rest of the day in the field.
Okay.
I just found that better for me, doing that as opposed to getting there a little bit later, going out in the field, and then spending the afternoon in the office and trying to do emails. Because by then, the job site changes so drastically every day. By then, you kind of lose track of what you actually have to do.
Really?
So.
And it just changes. It's that quick. Everyone's on a timeline.
Yeah,
get things done.
A week in construction is like a month.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
and you guys typically work weekends too, right?
Yeah, and then depending on where you're at, if the job's a little behind, you might be working Saturdays. I did go through a stretch when I was at the Moderna project in Cambridge. It was the last 6 months of the project, and I think I worked Saturday and Sunday every week for 7 straight weeks at the end to finish it. So it can get pretty taxing after a while.
Yeah, I bet. Was that a grind, and how did you get through that? Or you just
just
get it done?
I think the best The best thing we had was the boys that you were with in the office. It's kind of like a team. So I was blessed to have a crew of other guys our age, a few from my hometown, Jordan Latsanakis.
Oh, okay.
It was him, and then a few guys that I had worked with on previous projects. So every day you'd have a terrible day out in the field if things are just going sideways because the end of the job's always crazy. And you come back into the room and at least you had the guys that you kind of joke around with and lighten the mood. It's kind of like being in a locker room again.
There we go. You get in the culture, and I found that really beneficial too when you enjoy the people that you work with.
Yeah, for sure.
Because then work sometimes is going to be tough, but you got the people there to help push you through it. And Robbie and I played sports back in the day.
That's it.
We were on the same lacrosse team, and
I was terrible, but
Abbanat was the best team there was in the middle 6 league.
Oh yeah.
Kid was a force.
Brutal. But yeah, you go out and it's like you could have a terrible day, but you come back into the office and you can make jokes and everyone's kind of lightening the mood, so it's not that bad. And then you get up and you do it again.
There we go. You make stuff happen. So then you get this internship. What were some of the biggest lessons you learned actually being out in the field rather than in the classroom?
I think the biggest lesson was just how to interact with the guys. You show up as an intern and they don't really know where you're at, so they're going to test you and just see how much you can handle off the bat. At least that's how it was at JMA. So when I started, it was kind of, it wasn't necessarily go get coffee, but it was like, hey, I'm on the 42nd floor. Can you run the surveying equipment up for me? Yeah, sure, no problem. You run up. Hey, I'm down in the basement. I need this. Can you bring it down for me? Yeah, no problem. So all day you're kind of running around. And then while you're there, eventually they say, hey, we need a guy to do this. We're short-staffed. Can you take care of this? And for me, that was the demo team.
Got it.
So I was on a renovation project in Boston, One Post Office Square, which is a 40-story renovation project.
And this was your first project?
This is my first one. So they said, hey, we need a guy to run the demo crew on each floor because it wasn't a tear down. We kept the existing steel. But you had to demo out each floor as you went up. So they were like, we need a guy to do this specific piece. Can you take care of it? And that's what I started doing.
So you were actually doing the work?
Yeah, so I started interacting with the guys. And you kind of learn how they work and how they want you to work. And you can't necessarily always, take whatever they say for granted, but I try to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Okay.
My whole thing was they've been doing this for, 20, 30, 40 years. I've been doing it for a couple months.
Yeah.
Let's see what ideas they have, and then I'll see what I think and bank it off my boss. So that's kind of how I started actually working with the guys.
I think that's super valuable. What you just said is that because you're new, you're freshly out of college, these guys have probably been doing it for 20, 30 years, and they're like, who the heck is this kid from Wentworth trying to tell me what to do? Are there kids that come out of Wentworth and try to boss people around?
Yeah, I think some kids, they think because they went to school, they do think they know it all just because you've read it in a classroom. And I think they have an ego that they're almost above the guys that are on site because you're the one that's supposed to tell them, this is what I need you to do, this is where I need you to be. I think a lot of kids take that for granted. I think they kind of abuse it. A lot of guys don't respond well to that, and it just ends up in arguments every day.
Wow.
But I found if you just go in, you say, hey, I'm new, I'm trying to learn, can you teach me how to do this? This is what I need to get done. I find that they respond well. They like to help, and they like to pass knowledge down. So that's, they look at a kid like that, and hey, he wants to learn, let's help him out.
Yeah.
And there'll be blow-ups where you might not agree with what they have to say, but at the end of the day, you say, hey, listen, I'm just trying to get it done the right way. And they understand.
Because you're all one team at the end of the day.
At the end of the day, it's
trying to achieve one goal, which is to build the building
as
cheap as possible, as quickly as possible, and as
smartly as possible.
Yeah, just making sure it doesn't blow over anything. Have you had any instances where, because I've heard a story when they were building the Hancock Tower, they didn't gauge the wind, and then they were putting up the windows were falling off.
Oh, because they didn't take into account the pressure of
the
wind?
Or how much the building was swaying at the top. Because I guess at the top of the Hancock they have weights that counteract the wind.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's cool.
Have you had any situations like that where it's been a fire drill?
The worst one I had was I had to put in a foundation for it was basically a security system, but it required this massive footing. All it was bollards, which bollards are just a piece of steel in front of a building to keep cars from driving into the building. This was at the Moderna job.
Okay. Still your first job, right?
This one's now my second.
Oh, this is your second.
So now I kind of understood a little bit, but so we went in and the drawings didn't make any sense for this big foundation, but all we knew was it was huge and very important to the engineer. So we did what we thought was the right thing to do, which was to pour, they call it a mud mat, just a flat piece, a flat concrete footing, and then you build another footing on top of that. All it does is give you a level surface to work on. Otherwise, you'd be working in dirt. So we did that, and then the engineer decided that somehow that first layer of foundation, it wasn't structurally sound at the end of the day. So we poured it, and then we had to pull it back out. So I put all this time and effort. I was in there for 2 weeks trying to figure it out. Thought I finally made the right decision. And after all, we had to pay a guy to come, rip it all out, and redo it again.
How did they rip it? With jackhammers?
We had a big, it was a big excavator. I think it was a 350 excavator that came in, chipped it up for a day, removed it, and threw it all away. Wow. I think at the end of the day, it was probably 50 to 80 grand worth of work.
Was that something on you messing something up, or how did that?
Yeah, I think it was partly my fault for not asking enough questions to the engineer before doing the work, and then I also fault the engineer, I guess, a little bit for giving us a set of drawings that doesn't really make sense. A lot of times for projects to speed the process up, they just copy and paste different engineering details from past drawings or from past projects.
Makes sense for that.
So sometimes you get an old set that they just kind of grab from one project that they've done before and paste it onto the sheet for yours. So you look at it, you say, this doesn't make sense. So from that perspective, he should have done his more due diligence, but for mine, I should have been the guy asking the question saying, hey, this doesn't make sense. What should we do, rather than trying to say, hey, I think I can figure it out, I'm just going to go for it.
So
that was a big learning lesson for me. Hey, just make sure next time you go for it, or you go and you ask the right people as opposed to just going for it.
Yeah. Did you get in trouble for messing up, or?
No, I think you would get in trouble more if you tried to just point the finger to the other guy. I think when you just say, hey, this one's on me, I'm sorry, but I'll do whatever it takes to get it resolved, typically they understand.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dude, you're dropping knowledge right here. These two things about letting the guys kind of lead you at first, and then also asking questions, because a lot of people get scared, or they're like, hey, is there also like this sense of urgency that might lead to people making quick decisions?
That I think was part of it, because like I said earlier, we're at the end of the job, so we had to be done by a certain date. I think it was Thanksgiving maybe. So you're pushing hard to be done by that date. And if you don't have this installed at this time frame, then you can't kick off the work that falls behind it. So it was more just, I got to get this in so I can do the other stuff.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you slip up.
Yeah, and then it kind of messes everything up.
Yeah.
And when people are building out, this is kind of off topic, but these long project schedules, how, and you said the end of the job site's always like a fire drill.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any time that a schedule is the ample amount of time and it's never a fire drill at the end, or how do they go about that?
I think no.
Okay.
I think when the project kicks off and they have all the beginning meetings, I think a lot of the time everybody sits down in the room and they say, this is when I can deliver your building.
Who sits in the room?
And this would be, the executives from the general contractor, as well as engineers and the owner, and they all sit together and they come up on a date. Now, that date sounds great, but a lot of the time there's big incentive to finish early. So whether it's financial incentive, sometimes if you finish early and you save money, the GC and the owner will split whatever remaining cost is. So if you came in $1 million under budget and ahead of schedule, the GC might take home an extra $500,000. The owner might just keep an extra $500,000. Other times there's financial incentive, so when we did the Moderna project, the owner accelerated the schedule 6 months because you have a financial incentive for rent. So if he gets his building 6 months earlier, you can start charging rent 6 months earlier. And rent for a project like that was north of $5 million a month because it was a lab building.
And were you guys fitting out the lab space, or were you building the building from the ground up?
We did. So on that specific project, there were 2 JMA teams. One was called base building, which is what I was a part of.
Yeah.
So that's just structural steel and doing the exterior facade and maybe some bathrooms on the inside. And then we had a second JMA team called Day 2 that would come in, and they would handle all the lab fit outs. So it would be the Day 2/tenant team is what they called it.
Okay.
So the tenant team would do all the lab fit outs inside, and then the Day 2 would follow up as an addition to whatever the owner decided he wanted after the job was done. So you might complete all your contract work, and the owner says, hey, I want that outlet over there, I want a TV there, I want this room to be changed into this, and that's when the Day 2 team would come in and do that. So there was almost 3 teams at the end of the day, all for one company on the job.
And how long was that total project?
So we would start, I think, after a year or so after the base building team started. I think the Day 2 team would come in. I think it was about that. So we would start, we'd get all our steel up, and we'd start preparing spaces to be fitted out for these lab rooms. And the Day 2 or the 10 team would come in and start working.
So start to finish, it was what, like 3 years?
I think it was about 3 years. Yep.
Wow.
And then you'd have add-ons that would add extra time, but that's more or less okay because they know obviously you're not going to finish it in the time frame. So.
And then you probably would have a punch list at the end where the owner goes through and says like, I want this, and then is that kind of what you were referring to about the TV over there?
Yeah, so that would be, there's the punch list, which is the architect walks the whole building inside and out, and they look for imperfections, like something as simple as chipped paint. So they'll put a little piece of blue tape on it, say I want that addressed, or this isn't the right door hardware, whatever is wrong that they find that's in the original contract. After that, Day 2 team would come in, or the owner would just walk the space and say, hey, I would like that TV to be moved there. I want, instead of this being an office, I want it to be a conference room, and that's the Day 2 team would handle all the extras.
Got it.
So.
And then what is, because you mentioned that there's the general contractor, which you're in, and then there's the owner. Mm-hmm. What's that relationship between the general contractor and the owner?
It can vary job to job. Sometimes you get an owner that really doesn't care how much the building costs.
Yeah.
That was the Moderna job. It was kind of whatever it is, I don't care. I want to say the overall project cost for that was $800 million.
$800 million?
So I think at that point they don't really care what's $30,000. Especially if it's an ad for them. They have plenty. They don't care. It's $30,000. I want the room to look like this. Okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Other jobs, like I was at a project on Boylston Street, where you'd argue over 2,000, or you'd argue over 500. So it really just depends on the owner, and I think it depends a lot on the people. So I think it would be how myself and my boss would be with the owner. I like to think we had great relationships all the time. They'd take us out to lunch. We'd go get drinks after work with them. But I have heard stories of where it goes sour, where two people just don't get along. And when that can happen, it just makes for a headache of a job.
Do they sometimes just cut the GC in the project?
Yeah. I've thankfully never been on a job that's happened to. I think JMA doesn't really ever have that happen. I think JMA prides themselves on being one of the companies that strives for they look for the best quality of people. Not tooting my own horn, but that's just what the company's. Yeah. That's what the company's about. I think they look for more character than they do anything else. But I have heard of plenty of jobs where the owner just says, "Listen, we don't like how this is going, so we're going to remove you, and then we're going to get a new contractor in." And
then just to clarify, because people at home, when Rob is referring to the owner, that it pretty much means the money behind the project.
Correct. Yep.
And an owner could be what? When you work at it, could be private equity. Mm-hmm. What is the standard type of owner that you've dealt with?
Typically we deal with an owner's rep. So the owner will hire a team to handle finances. So you might actually never see the real owner of a job, but you'll see his owner's rep all the time.
Is this like a CBRE or is this a JR?
Yeah, CBRE. Sometimes you'll get who was it? We had Alexandria.
Okay.
Was another. I think I've only worked with them once, but I know they do a lot of work throughout Boston as well. We had a guy when I worked at the Dot Block project, which was a residential building in Dorchester.
Is that national development?
Was it? No, it's a private owner. His name's Gerald Chan. Okay. He's a Chinese billionaire. Oh, wow. But he hired Samuels and Associates to be his owner's rep, and they're great guys. They're awesome. So I actually never met him. I would just see him flying around above the job site in a helicopter. No. You'd see a white helicopter up top every 2-3 months, and that was him. And you knew that he was in town. So he never actually. I mean, I'm sure he did walk the job, but sometimes you just hear it hovering up top. You look up, and there he is. But yeah, so they would hire a separate company to handle their finances. So he doesn't have to actually deal with all the headaches himself.
Yeah.
I'm sure he does. I'm sure he deals with plenty of headaches, but he tries to limit it for the job sites.
That makes sense. And just to simplify, it'd be like if I had $1 billion, I have a parcel of land that I want to get built, I would then go to Rob or directly, and then Rob and I would work together to build it up.
Yep.
Or I would hire somebody, let's say I hire our friend Jack, and Jack would kind of be the middleman communicating between myself and Rob at the end of the day.
So
but a big thing of getting jobs is the bid process. What does that look like? Because I know there's other people at home. I know there's the Turners, there's the Suffolks.
Yep.
How do you all compete? Do you use the same subcontractors? What does that look like?
So another thing about JMA is they also pride themselves on typically we don't bid jobs. A lot of the time it's just word of mouth. People tend to like JMA because we pride ourselves on being honest contractors. Not to say that the others aren't, but they've built great relationships with a lot of the owners. So a lot of times it'll just say, hey, we need a contractor to build this building. Are you able to staff it? Are you too busy? Or could you do it? And a lot of times JMA will say, yeah, we can take it. Or probably 5-10 years ago, we were so busy we'd have to push away work.
Wow.
These days, just where the market's at, we're kind of scrapping to find stuff now. But yeah, back then it was a lot of, hey, we're so busy right now, we'd love to, but we can't. But you still keep a good relationship with the people, so down the road you can get work.
And is that standard? Do the Suffolks or the Turners, do they bid out? Or?
A lot of times they do. Typically, a lot of government work is all bid, regardless. So JMA didn't do any government work, but I know Suffolk and Turner would. So that's like building schools or government facilities. So they would send out basically, hey, we want to do this project to say 3-4 contractors, and then they would receive the bids from each contractor back. So say like 6 months later, you'd receive bids from each one of those. And then if I were the owner, I'd look at the list of contractors and their prices, and I would pick one based off that. That being said, the owner does their own due diligence, so they have a rough idea for what they think it's going to cost. So they compare their number to the other 4 and see kind of what makes the most sense.
Wow.
And a lot of times people think you take the lowest number, but you don't.
What do you?
Because the lowest number, say it's $2 million off from the highest number, that might sound great. Like you might get your building $2 million cheaper, but what do they miss? So a lot of times it's better to go with the middle guys.
Okay.
So say you have A, B, and C, you might want to go with B, even though the C option might be the cheapest one.
And when you say when they miss something, does that mean if I'm the owner and I'm going through 4 different bids, are you leveling all the bids to make sure they all have the same scope of work?
Yeah, exactly.
So you're saying that the lowest could be missing $2 million worth of work that A bid has, and then it's just change orders.
Yep, and a lot of times companies will slash prices to get the job.
What do you mean?
So in order to get the work, they cut the cost when they submit the bid. So they'll say, all right, realistically, we think it's going to be $100 million. Let's submit it $95 million to see if they'll do it. Because as an owner, you might say, hey, look, this guy's $5 million cheaper. I'll go with them. But at the end of the day, there's still $100 million worth of work to be done.
So then what happens?
So then at that point, you might get change controls, change orders.
Could you explain what those are?
So basically, it's a lot of time it has to do with time frame. So if you submit a change control, it's basically saying we need more time to do this, therefore it's going to cost more money. And hopefully it's not because of your fault if we didn't mess something up, which is affecting this time frame for this specific activity that you have to do. But a lot of times it is. A lot of times, hey, we missed this, we have to go back. We need more money because we messed it up. Can you provide that? So you have to ask the owner for more money now.
So then the owner, is that common? So
it happens all the time, and typically there's a contingency set aside for that. So you have a percentage of the overall job. So if you have a $100 million job, you might put a 10% contingency on that job. So you have $10 million set aside that you could pull from in the event that you need extra money for stuff. So that's typical for every job.
Because in reality of construction, things are going to get messed up. Right?
Exactly, and they know that. Typically the owner's done it before, so they'll set aside that price, and you can pull from that without too much trouble. The issue becomes if you've spent all of that and you still have costs coming in, because then the owner's saying, hey, not only did you spend the project cost, you spent the contingency, and now you're asking me for more money.
And then what are those conversations?
And then a lot of time the owner will tell you basically to pound sand, and that you'll have to, the GC would then have to pick up the cost.
Yeah, I
So
guess that would make sense though.
Yeah, which is fair enough. I don't fault the owner for saying that, but that happens pretty frequently.
And then is there a typical warranty on a project?
Yeah, I haven't dealt with that too much. I want to say, I think it kind of depends on what you're doing, but there's probably, for each whatever. A lot of time they warranty like appliances and stuff will have their own warranty, so you don't really worry about that. But if a building's leaking after 6 months, you probably have a 2-year warranty on the roof or something like that.
Yeah.
The GC's liable to come back and fix it.
Okay, then you come in. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's insightful. So then, could you walk us through? You mentioned that you were on a couple projects, like your first project, your second project, your third projects, and then how you progressed over those 3 projects.
Yeah, so I think coming in, my first project was dot block. So it was there's 250 units, 250 unit building in Dorchester. When I showed up that first day, I honestly didn't really know what I was doing. I've done the internships, so I had an idea, but once you're the guy and now you're being paid to execute this properly, it's a lot different of a feeling. So you walk in and you kind of just trying to get your bearings.
And what was your role for this first?
So the first one, I was an assistant superintendent. I think I was technically hired as a field engineer. Okay. A field engineer is just the guy who goes out and surveys the site. But when I got there, it was just my head superintendent, 2 project managers, and 1 other guy. So right away it was, hey, we need a guy to help do this. So for me, that was standing all the wood. It was a wood building, so it was standing all the wood, the precast wood panels, which they would get shipped from Canada. It was these big 15 by 10 foot panels, and you basically stand them up like Legos and build the building that way. So it's, hey, we need a guy to do that. So thankfully I had the help. My head superintendent and the other guy that was there had done it before, but they said we need a guy in the field every day making sure that this goes in right.
And then if you had no idea what was going on, how would you know if it was going correctly?
So typically, my super was great there. He would walk with me every day, and he would highlight, certain things that he sees that are wrong. Thankfully, nothing was too big of a deal. But he'd call out little stuff like, hey, make sure you keep an eye out for this. This bolt pattern needs to be this way. So going forward, I know, hey, my bolt pattern needs to be this way. Make sure you check that everywhere. So every day he'd go through that with me. He'd find little stuff to point out that needs to be fixed or just something to keep an eye out for.
Yeah.
And you'd have your little field book. I had a little yellow field book. It was about this big. But I would keep it with me every day and I'd write notes down. So anything I had to do or check or, I'd have little drawings in there, stuff to make sure that it was going in right. But I'd read through it every day, my previous checklist from the past day as well, and just make sure that I'm hitting all the boxes I need to.
Nice. And how long was that project in total?
That one I was on for 2 years, I want to say.
2 years.
So when I got there, the foundation was already complete.
Okay.
And then we built the building. Once I finished standing all the wood panels, I was the amenity guy. So the amenity space is public areas, gym. I did a gym. There was a pool there, like a hangout space where you could, cook dinner and whatever, have friends over. It's just a public area where everybody that lives there can hang out. So I did all that, and then I got pulled and sent to my second job, which is the Moderna job I was talking about.
There we go. When you were building these amenity spaces, is this what you're referring to? Of hey, here's the blank slate.
Yep.
Yeah. You gotta figure it out.
Yeah. So it was kind of hey, now we have all the walls stood and all the drywall's up. This space is yours. We need it to look like this at the end of the day. Have at it. So it's basically just a flat floor plan.
Yeah.
No studs except the exterior wall are up. And we need to look like this. They hand you a set of drawings, and they say at the end of the day, you got 8 months to do this. So I built a gym. I did a whole, like I said, pool space, blah blah blah.
Was that stressful?
Yeah.
Did you have an understanding of how everything worked out?
At that point, I kind of got it because I had been there for probably 7-8 months at that point. So I understood the process a little bit, but I definitely needed help from all the other guys to really get it done correctly. Luckily, they were nice enough. They never batted an eye if I asked for help. So they'd walk the space and help me out with whatever I needed.
So it sounds like you had great mentors.
Yeah. I think the guys that I worked with or worked under I couldn't ask for better guys.
And did they come from a similar background, or were they trades that they wanted to?
Yeah, they're similar. My immediate boss, I think he was in his mid-50s, but he was a fellow Wentworth guy.
Oh, there we go.
Same major as myself. And he's bounced around a couple companies. I think he's now been with JMA for 10 years, I want to say. But he's seen it all and done it all. So he really showed me what I need to do. And him and I loved hanging out in general, so it was no issue. Just say, hey, Bill, I need you to come walk this with me. No problem.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it to credit, I mean, all of it is just to the people you work with and how they treat you.
And now they treated you that way, so you're probably going to help out that new kid that's coming out.
Exactly, yeah.
Hey, Rob, I need some help. I don't know what the heck I'm doing.
So the cool thing is once you've been around for a little while, now you're not the new guy anymore. And then you get a young kid out of college. So I had a couple of those, and I wouldn't pretend to be their boss or anything. That's not my position, but just show them what I know, and if they have questions, I let them know. Feel free to ask. And they would. I love telling them at least what I know or what I think is right.
Yeah.
No problem. So yeah, they got pulled from that job and went to my second one, which is the Moderna job.
And then from the first to the second to the Moderna job, how did your roles and responsibilities change?
So when I got to my second job, they needed a guy to do all the exterior. So now instead of a blank space and it was a couple rooms, it was, hey, we need you to do the whole street. We need you to do an intersection. We need you to do all the landscaping outside.
Wow.
So it was a lot more all of a sudden. So instead of just like a few rooms, now you're responsible for the whole exterior of the job site, which it sounds easy enough and it's not too crazy, but you're putting in new gas lines and water lines and all these new underground utilities. So you basically dig the whole job site up. So everyone's mad at you for like probably 6 months because it looks like World War I trench warfare out there. And then once you get all your utilities in, then you can do your finishes, which some of these finishes are pretty in-depth. The engineers they put all this crazy stuff in for their landscaping areas.
Is there no way to put the gas lines in prior?
No, you do. You have to do it towards the end of the job, just because you don't want live gas lines going into your building while it's under construction.
Yeah.
You kind of wait until it's pretty much buttoned up. The other reason is you don't want to put fresh sidewalks in before your building's done.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to have cranes and excavators driving all over them, and at the end of the day, you want it to look nice. So it's basically an apron for the building. So you don't want to ruin it with all this.
What were your lessons learned there? Any big takeaways?
I think I had more guys at that point that I was responsible for, making sure they're doing the right thing.
How many are you talking?
Probably, I had 4 separate trades, probably 20, 30 guys that I was responsible for. It's their whole crew. So there's a head foreman. Head foreman basically runs the whole team. So you'd have a landscaper. He would be the head guy you talk to, and he would have 5 guys under him. But you spend the day with those guys every day, and you'd have a guy doing that, a guy doing utilities, a guy over here doing the road. So you have a bunch of different guys you're working with every day. And I think the biggest thing was just how to juggle all these different people.
Yeah.
Because the guy that installs the water lines and the drain lines needs to be in the same place as the guy doing the landscaping. So those two argue. So you're in the middle of a fight, and they're also arguing with the guys that are putting the windows in.
What are they arguing about?
Just space. But you have a lot of big machines that need to be in the same area. This guy's yelling at this guy, that guy's yelling at this guy. They're all yelling at me. So I think kind of keeping a level head and trying to really figure out how to solve the problem instead of just blowing up was the biggest thing I learned.
Wow. And then do they have to, I'm assuming something like the guy that's doing the water might have to do the work before the landscaper. How do you make sure they're all in sync?
So that would be where I would come in, and I'd say, I'd put a drawing together, a highlighted up drawing. You can build it on the line. We use BIM 360, which you can take the plans and you can highlight different areas. And you say, this is where you're going to work for the next 2 weeks. This is where you're going to work, and then you're going to flip, so that they're never on top of each other. At least you always think it's going to work that way, and then about 2 hours after you give them each the drawing, there's a big fight that you have to go, remediate, and then you eventually it does work out, but that's typically how it goes.
Okay.
So,
and then
you try to separate them as much as you can. I also found that you get them together and you have them build a good relationship where they're now kind of friendly with each other. Then they start helping each other out. Hey, I need to be here. I need to be there. Could you mind helping me? Sure. So eventually that kind of happens. You're playing mediator.
And do a lot of the subs already know each other?
Yeah, a lot of them have been on previous jobs, which can be good and bad. So if they both came from a job where they hated each other, now they're coming to do a new job, they still hate each other, then they're getting in a fight every day. But if they said, hey, that guy's great, I worked with him, like, we have a great thing going, don't worry about us, then it's great. You kind of throw your hands up. You say, this is just what I need done. Take care of it.
And then another thought I just thought of, and then we'll get to your third project.
Yeah.
Is I keep hearing that not as many people are going to the trades. Do you see that firsthand, and what does that look like? Yeah,
absolutely. I think there's a stigma on the trades that, it's a nitty-gritty job. You're out in the cold in the winter all day. I think a lot of people are kind of veering away from that.
So that's true. You're seeing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think they say there's some statistic like every 40 guys that retire from the union, one comes in.
Wow.
So they're really dropping, which can be good for kids coming up now. Like, if you don't want to go to college, if that's not for you, you can make a ton of money going into the trades. Becoming an electrician or a plumber, they'll take it. We were taking people off the street at my job in Dorchester.
What do you mean taking people off the street?
We literally held, we'd have a little booth set up in the public, hangout spot. What's that, the little downtown, town common area?
Oh, Boston Common?
Yeah, not Boston Common, but like for Dorchester, the little common area.
Okay.
And we'd have a booth saying, if you want a job, if you want to learn to be an electrician or you want to learn to be a plumber, come to our job site.
Wow.
And these companies would take people under their wing, and you'd have a few new apprentices that they'd show the ropes to. Not everybody's stuck, but sometimes it happens. We had one lady come in and ask if she needs to pass a drug test, and we said yes, and she turned around and left.
You got to make sure safety on the job sites.
Exactly. Yeah, you can't take them.
So if there's a shortage, it sounds like there's an opportunity for young, hungry people coming up to seize this opportunity. But is there a chance that there'll just always be a shortage of tradespeople, which could lead to an issue?
I think, so my personal opinion is, with how expensive college is to go to, and how all you hear is all these kids are in so much student debt, you're never going to climb out all the debt. I think it's a great opportunity. I'm not saying college is bad by any means. I love my time, but a lot of these kids, if it's not for you, go be an electrician, go be a plumber. You'll make tons of money with no student debt. You'll be set for life, and I think it's a great opportunity for people to get into.
So maybe the scales get to a point where it's going to tip, where there's a shortage, and then college is so super expensive, and now people are realizing it might not be worth it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And a lot of kids, we've seen it. They go to college, and it's really not their passion.
Exactly.
And they just do it because they.
I think a lot of kids I think it's just, that's what you're supposed to do these days.
Especially from a town that we're from.
Yeah, and I think, 50 years ago, I think it was, if you went to college, it was because you were really passionate about this, and you were really good at this. Whereas I think now a lot of kids just go because, you kind of shuttled to go. And I'm not, college is great. I loved it, but, if it's not for you, maybe you check this out.
I agree. And if it's, I agree. But it's that typical, hey, if you want to get into the stereotypical white collar,
exactly,
you have to get some sort of bachelor's degree or something just to keep it going.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that there's a lot of money to be made in the trades. I see it every day. You see the checks that some of these guys get. It's like, oh my god.
Hey, you heard it here first. If you're interested in making money, hit up Rob. All right, so you have these first two job sites, and now you have one final one. What was that?
Yeah, the last one was, it wasn't as crazy as my second one. It was just called 350 Boylston Street, which was just residential space on the first floor. We were planning on putting in, I think a couple restaurants are going. They don't really quite know what they're going to use the space for yet. But it was an 11-story building, and levels 2 through 11 were just typical office spaces.
Got it.
So there I kind of started doing a little bit of everything too. I got involved in building the garage, which, as boring as that sounds, there was a gym down there that was cool. So I built that. Yeah. So built one of those. It had like showers and whatever, locker room, big gym. So that was cool to build. And then I did the exterior there as well, and then kind of miscellaneous stuff within the building, just to help a couple guys out if they needed. We were kind of short-staffed at the time, so it was kind of, once again, dipping your toe on everything there. Yeah. But I think by then was when I really started to feel comfortable doing this line of work, was after two jobs.
Yeah, that makes sense too, just getting those reps. Yeah. And out of those 3 projects, which was your favorite?
I think my favorite one, probably the second one, just because it was so crazy. But it sounds wild, but you're so into it. It's all you really think about, and you're so into it. You know every detail, you know everything, and then we had such a good crew of guys there that it was just a blast. I mean, some days were long, and some days, you hated being there, but you knew so much about what you were doing, and you felt so involved that it was actually a lot of fun. And then you'd come back in, like I said, if you had a tough day, you'd come back into the locker room, we'll call it the office, and you kind of just hang out and mess around with the guys.
And how does it make you feel now when you drive past that building? Is it a sense of pride?
Yeah, you kind of like, I'll drive by with my family or friends or whatever, and I'm pointing out all the stuff I did, because I was the exterior guy, so all my stuff's right there.
Yeah.
So I'd say like, oh, there's the road I built, there's all the fancy whatever stuff I put outside. No one ever cares when I write their show. They're like, oh, great.
Yeah. No, it's
but me, I'm like, this is awesome. Yeah, I think it's cool. And then I found, even driving around the city now, when I see new projects going up, or even a 3-family residential building, I'm driving around and checking it out, kind of seeing where they're at. I love it, so it just entertains me.
And what do you love about the construction aspect? Is it the chaos? Is it the tangibility? What is it?
I think it's the interaction. I think my best skill is face to face, talking with people. So I love that. I was never really a computer guy. So it allows me to go out and talk to people and plan. I have a lot of freedom to do what I think's right. Obviously, people check to make sure you're doing the right thing, but you have a lot of freedom to do what you want to do. As long as it gets done and it gets done right at the end of the day, they don't really care. So if it's on time, you're not going over budget. You have the freedom to do it how you want to do it, which I liked a lot. I could go and I say this is how I think it should be done. This is what I think is best, and they'll let you do it if it works.
So then, high level, what skills are necessary for this field to be successful?
I think the best one is just people to people. I think you need to be able to interact, talk to other guys. I think honesty goes a long way in this business, as it does every business, but I think guys really respect. A lot of times if you mess up, you just throw your hands up and say, listen, this one's on me, I own it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of guys respond well to that. I think that's a big thing you need to have is, I'd say, honesty and just personability, being able to talk to people. Yeah.
I like that. That reminds me of this thing that it's called extreme ownership. It's exactly what you said. Instead of trying to point the finger, it's just, hey, this is on me. What do we now have to do to fix it?
Yeah, exactly.
Because then if you point the finger, it doesn't do any good. And I mean, if you're in charge of the site, there's probably some sort of blame, even if it's not entirely on you. It's you're the person leading the project.
Exactly. You're the one that told them to do it at the end of the day. Now, if they did mess it up, you can say, hey, listen, I know you didn't do it right, but at the end of the day, who cares how it happened? This is where we're at.
Yeah.
So I would always say, he messed it up, but this is where we are now. It's going back and arguing about what happened in the past. It's not going to make it any different.
It's a waste of energy.
So you might as well just direct your energy to trying to figure out how to get it done right.
I like that. I like that mindset, Rob. And then another thing, this is going pivoting in a different direction. I brought it up earlier, but safety on the job site.
Safety's huge.
What does that look like? And have you been on the job site and has anyone gotten severely injured?
Severely injured. I hope
not. But.
No, I've seen people break their legs and arms. Yeah, not physically seen it, but it's happened on the job sites I've been on, or concussions, stuff like that. Thankfully, I haven't seen anything worse than that. But yeah, safety's huge. First things first is we screen everybody. So drug test every time they enter the site. Just the first time. It's not like we're gonna drug test them every day.
So in the cup.
Yeah, exactly. So when they show up, we test them. If they pass, they're obviously allowed to go on the job site. If not, we tell them they can't work today.
What are you testing them for? Marijuana?
I think it's marijuana and then opiates and like all the other stuff. So yeah, you make sure that everybody's clean first, and then they gotta have boots, jeans, high vis or usually it's a vest, but a lot of guys will just wear high vis sweatshirts, and then a hard hat. So if you see somebody walking around without a hard hat, you tell them. You say, hey, do you mind grabbing your hard hat, put it on? And typically they will. They know the deal. But if you consistently see them not wearing it, you've told them a bunch of times, you can tell them to take a hike.
Yeah.
Which you have to do. Some guys, they just don't want to do it. Other stuff is, if they're welding or if they're, cutting steel or whatever, you tell them to throw safety glasses on. Because God forbid, you don't want metal shards in your eye.
Yeah.
That happens fairly often.
Really?
Yeah.
Guys just rip it without goggles?
Yeah, a lot of times they're trying to do it quick. They just want to get it done, so, next thing you know, you pick the saw up and you get a piece of metal in your eye.
That stinks.
Yeah, so safety's huge for sure.
One common theme that has just been a theme of this video is how quickly something can get done. Is that the number one thing on people's mind in construction of like, let's get this done as quickly as possible?
Speed, yeah. Time is money, especially in construction. Yeah, it's insane. A lot of these guys, it's just, we need to get this done as fast as possible. So, and the reason behind it, I'm sure there's plenty of reasons, but one is when a subcontractor bids a job, they bid it for total hours. So say they bid a job, they think it's going to take 5,000 hours to do this job. So they only elect 5,000 hours worth of manpower to that job. So everything they save, they're still getting paid for that 5,000 hours worth of work. So if they do it in 4,000 hours, then that company just saved 1,000 hours worth of work, if that makes sense.
Yes, they get paid for 5,000.
Yeah.
They do it in 4,000.
Which is why you'll find a lot of the times when you're at the end of the job, in the last year to 6 months of the job, they'll start pulling guys off the job rather than staffing it properly. So if you had 10 guys installing siding, all of a sudden you start seeing 8, then 7, then 6. And you're like, what are we doing here? We have a whole project to do. I know you need those guys. Why are you pulling them off the job? And they won't outright say it, but it's because they're creeping up on that 5,000 hour number or whatever they bid it out as.
And then they don't want to exceed that.
Yeah. So they know if they have 10 guys there at full bore for another, say, 2-3 months, they're going to go over that number, and now the company starts losing money.
And the subcontractor eats it.
Yeah.
And do you guys bid out subcontractors?
Yeah, we'll send out. So once we were given the job, we being the general contractor, we'll send it out to our subcontractors that we typically use. So we'll have the same guy for the drywall guys, always typically the same. We have 2 or 3 that we'll rotate through. Same for electricians and plumbers and blah blah blah. So we'll just receive 2 or 3 bids from each different trade, and then pick one from there.
Nice.
Or there's sometimes you have a deal. Hey, you get this job done for me, and you do it well. We'll get you on the next one.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it works.
So it's your relationship too.
Yep.
All right. Wow. That was
It's a big debrief.
That was good. And in terms of anything, you got anything big coming up, or what's on the docket for Rob Abbanat?
I think so. Other than continuing with the superintendent thing, I think I'm gonna start trying to do my own thing a little bit.
Okay.
Not necessarily open a construction company, but I want to start getting into the real estate market myself. So I've been looking around to try to get 2 or 3 families. Nothing too serious yet, but kind of starting to work towards that direction. I want to eventually own property, and I think the two kind of tie well together. Especially in Massachusetts, anything you buy here that, or at least that I can afford, you're going to have to put a lot of work into.
And you've got the background, you got all the connections,
so
you know how to do it.
I'm confident that if I get a property that I can take care of the work. I also now know enough different trades and stuff that I could, pull a couple guys in. If I need an electrician or a plumber, I could call a guy and have them there quick enough anyway. So I think I could do a lot of the work myself, which is what my plan is next.
Dude, well, good luck with that. And then,
Thanks, Brian.
would you be able to give advice to somebody that is maybe interested or just starting off in construction? What would you say to them?
I think the best advice I would give would be, if it's something you're really interested in, go for it, and just don't think that you're above the other trades. Just because you're the guy responsible for managing them, it doesn't mean that you have to treat them any differently. Make sure you go in there with an open mind that these guys have been the guys doing it for years. They typically know what to do, and they try to do the right thing. Are they going to mess stuff up? Sure, but so are you.
Yeah.
So go in there with an open mind and say, hey, this guy's here. He knows what to do. Let me just get his advice. Let's see how he would do things. I think that was the best advice that I got and that I've used. And I think that's what's really helped me throughout the start of my career.
I love it, man. You're young, you're hungry,
That's
and you got a great mindset, it seems like, in terms of just self-awareness, and I have no doubt you'll go a long way. Do you have any final any final closing remarks you want to let the people at home know?
Shout out, Brent. Thanks for having me today. This kid's killing it. This kid's going to be wearing some big shoes in the future. I know that. So I appreciate that. Thanks, Brent.
Rob,
appreciate it.
Thank you.